based on my discussions with Dave and the rest of the staff, there's a great historical record here with prior site plans and some pretty extensive studies of proposed projects out at the airport. Those studies will all be helpful in kind of accelerating Harry's process through site plan. I'm pretty confident. They don't have to start from scratch. A lot of those old reports and studies can be embedded in the new site plan review and hopefully fast tracked, if you will, by the town planning board.
So essentially, Don, that 90-day notice will not slow up the process at all because you'll still be proceeding on site plan and all the other aspects as well.
Yep.
Okay. I'm probably going to have some other questions with regard to the land itself. I don't really want to get into it right now, but just some of the things that, Dave, you know, that we talked about last week. I don't want to get, like I said, into the weeds, but some things that will come up.
Okay. Justin, thanks. That's very descriptive and similar to what we reviewed in executive session. So in essence, we're having a discussion. This may get moved to the full board, and at that point, we're really just then setting up a bunch of soft gateways. We've got planning and design, we've got local with zoning and planning, and then we've got financing, and all of those three will converge to construction essentially. And they all take different amounts of time to occur, most of which would be simultaneous with each other. So I think as Justin indicated, this isn't a traditional loan where we meet at the next board meeting, sign a resolution, and then just write a check. There's periods of time to have other gateways reached. So, Mr. Converse, since you're the only other person on loan review, is there anything that you wish to explore in executive session on these two loan requests?
Well, David, I would just ask when we do go into executive session that the motion includes allowing the representatives from the Watertown Trust and from North Country Alliance Development Authority to join us in executive session.
Yeah, and our council. I mean, so really,
yes. Yep.
Don't know who. There's three names that I don't recognize that I can see two are with reviews. Who's Kylie?
Kylie is the administrative assistant for Don Rutherford at the Watertown Trust.
Okay, so yeah, so anyone involved with any of the involved interagency public financing, I would agree should remain, and our council.
Right. Well, we've got everybody before we go into executive session. One question I'll pose to Harry, and I think it'll clear up a lot of potential questions in the future for everybody in the public, is because this is such a large manufacturing endeavor, particularly with solar panels, and to some degree we're competing with China. Can you reinforce to us what a good position we are in to do that and be competitive with what we have here in the North Country?
Yeah, so this may take a few minutes, but let me paint the picture of what has happened in the last 10 years, right? So the US and Germany were leaders in making the panels. The Chinese stepped in because the Chinese government basically said, we want to control this. And the government funded 5 or 6 companies with unlimited amounts of capital to basically set up the entire manufacturing process. So in that process, you have raw silica, ingots, wafers, cells, panels, right? And right now, China just controls that entire value chain. They've just basically taken it from underneath us as well as in Germany. Now, the reason why, if I look at why some of the players in America failed, and that's actually a very important lesson for us to understand why they failed before we get into it, is basically First Solar and SunPower and Solar Work never had a strong development business, okay? So they were manufacturers first, and then they did some small development or large development on their own, not enough. So they were dependent on the third-party market to buy their panels, okay? Now, when the third-party market is basically subject to the prices of China. China decides, I just want to, compete really hard and shut somebody down. All they have to do is just lower the prices until a couple of people fall off, and then they raise the prices again. And if somebody comes back again, they lower the prices down again. And they keep doing this, and they can do it because they control the entire value chain. Now, in our case, because we have such a strong development pipeline, we could care less what they do with the prices, because we just negotiate, the tariff of what we sell the electricity for, and it's up to us to manufacture and supply to our own projects. So if 60% to 70% of our panels are going to our own projects, we could care less what happens in the external marketplace. We make little less money, on the development side. Fine, that's something that I'm willing to forego, me as a developer. I'm willing to forego that for the sake of the fact that we've got, an American-made, panel coming up. And as long as we have the wherewithal to stick with it and stay with it for the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be fine. So this is actually a critical point of distinction, and that is we're not getting into this without an offtake. We actually have offtake, and that's our own projects. If you look at a case study of Jinko Solar in Florida, a Chinese company went into Florida, set up a 400 megawatt facility. They didn't even put up $1 until Florida Light and Power gave them a binding contract to buy those panels up to 2,000 megawatts of panels are going to get purchased by Florida Light and Power from Jinko Solar. Now, Jinko is a Chinese firm with a subsidiary here in the United States. The key components, the ingots, the wafers and cells are manufactured there, and we just make the panels here and supply to Florida Light and Power. So in our case, it's an American firm, American manufacturing, going to our own projects, and our projects are, I wouldn't say they're well known, but they're known. They're known to a number of agencies within the United States. They're known to the foreign governments where we operate. So that's a key distinction as to why, the strategy that we have put together is different than what's happened in the past where American manufacturers have failed.
And we also have access to low-cost power here to help offset some of his energy costs as well.
Correct.
Well, I think from my understanding, one of the notable differences, you'll be making all those components here.
Correct. So the next part of it is you make the panels. Now, if we have our own projects, we're going to install them in our projects. So we need fabrication of the steel structures that hold the panels on the ground. And we're now in conversation with a couple of folks here locally to fabricate that steel for us. So if we have a project in Chad or in Sierra Leone or some of these other African countries where there's not a whole lot of local manufacturing, we would just manufacture it, put it in a container, ship it out, and then basically what you do on the ground is you send a team of people on the ground, train the local staff, install it, pull the team out, the team goes to the next location and does the same thing again and again, right? So what we see happening is building, a local supply chain over a period of time. I would say in the next 5 to 7 years, we want to build a local supply chain. So that's steel fabrication. Later on, it could be the wires that go into the project, the electrical wires, and then obviously you've got the panels, and then you're probably going to get 1 or 2 logistics companies get set up because there is a fair degree of logistics involved. So, it's going to spoon off a number of other opportunities, which we don't factor in the job number. We're purely just talking about what are the jobs that we directly create, and there are indirect jobs that are going to get created from the supply chain. We've had conversations with motor manufacturers. When the panels go on a structure, there are single-axis trackers. The trackers are in the sun, so they tilt the panel depending on the time of the day. These trackers are basically motors. Most of them are brush motors, and there are some brushless motors, but most of them are brush motors. These motors can be manufactured, and I believe right here in Watertown, I think you've got 1 or 2 manufacturers already. There are, a number of other initiatives that would follow through on this. It's going to come down to a matter of price, but the way you address that price is we do need both at the federal level and at the state level, and to do work with these companies and us on attractive financing. Because if we are to compete with institutions that have state funding or quasi-state funding abroad, we do need to support this. And I think that's one critical aspect of us is to advocate very heavily with both the federal government and state government that, there needs to be attractive financing and working capital lines, for the businesses and supply chain network that we build.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. So, with that, I'd now like to make a motion that we move to executive session to discuss disposition of real property and personal finances, with regards to, both Commvault Energy and DigiCollect combined. And we would allow, our council and, Water Town Local Development, North Country Alliance, and if anyone from DANK is on, I don't think so, to also remain, and also our LDC members. I think it's everybody that's on right now. Is that Christine Powers that's calling the 221-401?
Yes, it is, Rob.
Okay, just to make sure your number looks familiar, so obviously you and Rob can stand as well, so,
And Rob, and just Rob, just for the record, I wasn't clear before, but Matt Cyber actually works for the Development Authority of the North Country, which administers the loan funds for the North Country Alliance and the North Country.
okay, sorry, I gave you the wrong alphabets.
No, I didn't clarify that before.
And I'll staff, and I'll make that motion, Rob.
Okay, I'll second it then. All in favor, aye?
All right.
Okay, we'll go to executive session and